And welcome into Detroit's only nightly political talk show, diving into all things people, power, and politics. Thanks for coming in every night to check out what we're talking about. This is The Pulse. I'm Root Barrage. Less than a week now until a new president is in office, and we're getting a closer look at who will and won't be attending the inauguration. Those details are ahead. And now that the presidential race is well over, who's ready to talk midterms? Crickets. Okay, we aren't either, but there is some news surrounding the race for governor. Who's joining the race on the Republican side of the ticket? An interesting name. We'll tell you about that coming up. And the director of black media for the Biden administration says she's worried about President-elect Trump undoing the progress the outgoing president made. But a Republican state senator here in Michigan says not so fast. They're both in the hot seat, debating it all in about 15 minutes. But we begin tonight with the raging fires in Los Angeles County. I don't know about you, still hard to see these pictures. These firefighters working around the clock to try their best to put this out. Tonight, there's a new warning from officials. Tens of thousands are without power because those strong winds are picking up, and authorities shut off the electricity to try to stop more fires from sparking in that area. At least 24 people have died, and now crews are doing the grim task of trying to find the missing. Fox 2's Jessica Dupnack flew out to Los Angeles County to help our sister station, Fox 11, with their coverage, but joins us tonight on The Pulse with what she's seeing on the ground. Jess.
Yeah, hey, Roop. Jessica here, and I am in one of the hardest hit areas in an area called Altadena that was ravaged by the Eaton fire. You can see behind me that there are crews doing what's called urban search and rescue, searching these structures, what's left of them, for human remains. There are still 24 people missing as a result of the Eaton fire, 16 confirmed deaths. So part of the mission here beyond the checkpoint is to possibly reunite folks with remains of their loved ones. Now, where we're standing right now, we had to get through a security checkpoint that's being manned by the National Guard because this is an evacuation area, and the media is allowed sort of on the front lines. We just can't go on private property. But I got to tell you, this is just absolutely devastating to see firsthand. And it's one of those situations where you hope it's only a couple of blocks or something like that. But in the Eaton fire, 3,200 structures have been completely destroyed. So right now what's going on in this neighborhood is not only the search and rescue efforts, but a lot of power crews are in the area, and they're working to restore power because it's one of those situations where a few blocks over, there will be standing structures and people will want to come back and live. We just talked to the assistant fire chief of Los Angeles Fire, and he is showing and expressing so much gratitude to all of the fire crews, thousands and thousands of fire crews from around the area to help make this place habitable again. But again, we'll take a look at just the devastation of what this fire has done. We will continue to bring you updates throughout the week, but for now, Jessica Dupnack, Fox 2 News.
It's so tough. Jessica's been working from like 6 in the morning, bringing Fox 11 the help that they need to put the news on the air because the reporters and everyone there, they're so tired working around the clock, literally a week straight. A little less than 90,000 people are under evacuation orders in Los Angeles County. The feds are taking the lead and trying to figure out what caused each fire, but those drought conditions and those high winds have made everything there just a heck of a lot worse. Now, we do want to get you up to date on some major political news in our state, because while we might not want to talk about 2026 just yet, politicians are already looking ahead. And now we know the name of at least one person who's joining the race on the Republican side of the ticket. It's the top Republican in the Senate, Eric Nesbitt, who represents the West Michigan area. In a campaign video, Nesbitt pledged his support for President-elect Trump and criticized Democrats for higher taxes and higher government spending. He joins Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan on that list, who are making a run. Duggan, as you know, running as an independent. The Dems have several candidates weighing in on whether or not they want to run, but so far no one has thrown their hat completely in the ring just yet. Of course, this show will be on top of it. Speaking of 2026, another candidate jumping into the race to replace Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who we just mentioned is making a bid to become the governor. That's what he hopes. Sontil Jenkins, a former city council member who now runs the Heat and Warmth Fund, or THAW, announced her bid today. Jenkins was elected to city council in 2009, later serving as council president. Take a listen to what she says.
This campaign is not just about electing a mayor. It's about creating a city where dreams are nurtured, where neighborhoods are safe and thriving, and where every Detroiter has a chance to succeed.
That's right.
Because guess what? Detroit is not a comeback story. Detroit is a story about how we never left. A story about when the... Thank you. We never left. We never left. This is a story about when the going got tough, Detroiters got going.
Now, Jenkins was born and raised in Detroit. She joins current City Council President Mary Sheffield, who officially announced a run for mayor as well. So far, 2 official candidates for this big race. Major news from the Justice Department tonight, as we are now getting a look at a report from Special Counsel Jack Smith into the DOJ's election interference case against President-elect Trump. Smith abandoned that case after Trump was elected because of a long-standing DOJ policy that presidents can't be federally prosecuted. First, Smith pushed back on President-elect Trump's claim that the DOJ is dropping the case. Smith says, bottom line, he was not exonerated, as Trump says he was. He pointed again to the policy that presidents simply can't be prosecuted while in office, but says his office fully stands behind that prosecution. Smith also said while his office looked at charging Trump with violating the Insurrection Act, they decided it would have been too risky, calling the statute dormant. But it did blame Trump for the violence that happened at the Capitol January 6th of 2021. Now, the report also said Trump knowingly spread bogus claims of election fraud and used those lies as a way to hold on to power. We should point out there's no evidence of widespread election fraud in the 2020 vote. Trump's own Justice Department said that. Now, Trump said on Truth Social that he's, quote, totally innocent, but Smith also said in the report he's confident that had Trump not been elected, he would have been convicted. And that's where we're bringing you in. We wanted to know if you agreed Trump would have been convicted had he not won that other term. We hit the streets to get a pulse check. Here's what some of you told us.
Man, that's a good question. I bet it influenced his status because he has immunity. But I think it will be, yeah, if he wasn't president, definitely you will, compromise. Absolutely.
I don't think so.
How come?
I think because he's such a polarizing figure, that the way that he falls as far as his political beliefs, I think they're just so polarizing that people just like to jump on politicians, whether fair or not fair.
Get a lot of the people in the background going to the Wings game just saying, go Wings. Everyone get on board with that. We're also asking you the question on fox2detroit.com. If you want to weigh in, scan the QR code on the right of your screen. So far, most of you say no, Trump would not have been convicted if he weren't elected. To get to Capitol Hill once again now, where one of President-elect Trump's cabinet appointees is getting grilled by a Senate committee. Army veteran and former Fox News host Pete Hegseth appeared for his hearings today, and those hearings got heated when allegations of excessive drinking and sexual assault came up. Hegseth vowed he wouldn't drink on the job and said this about the sexual assault allegation.
Coordinated smear campaign orchestrated in the media against us. That was clear from moment one.
The American people need a SecDef who's ready to lead on day one. You are not that person.
I don't believe that you can tell this committee or the people of America that you are qualified to lead them.
I think he's addressed those allegations, and I didn't see all of it. I saw pieces of it, but every report I've had, the readout from the hearing this morning is that he acquitted himself extremely well and made a strong argument for why he ought to be the next Secretary of Defense.
It's no secret Mr. Hegseth has some incredibly troubling allegations against him. He is, by all accounts, woefully unfit to be Secretary of Defense.
The committee will vote later on if Hegseth's nomination should go in front of the whole Senate. Of course, we have our senators there, Melissa Slotkin, Gary Peters. Now, he can only lose 3 Republican votes, assuming all Democrats vote against him. Now to the brewing battle over flag staffs on Inauguration Day. Remember this? President Biden ordered American flags to half-staff for 30 days after former President Jimmy Carter's death. That ends on the 28th, 8 days after the inauguration. But there's a push among Republicans to raise them to full staff when President-elect Trump is sworn in. House Speaker Mike Johnson ordered flags at the U.S. Capitol be raised to full staff on Inauguration Day. Johnson said it's to celebrate America coming together to inaugurate President-elect Trump, saying they'll be lowered back to half-staff the next day to continue the honoring of former President Carter. And Republicans at the state level are calling for the same thing to happen here. In fact, State Senator Jim Runestad requested Governor Whitmer's raise flags to full staff on Inauguration Day, saying Inauguration Day should be a day of hope. That statement went on to say keeping flags lowered on Inauguration Day demeans the significance of Trump's inaugural ceremonies and disregards the weight that this day should hold for all Michiganders. I request that Governor Whitmer order all flags to be raised in celebration of our nation's great traditions and in respect of the incoming 47th President of the United States. Senator Jim Runestad will be in this program, by the way, just in a few minutes here in Studio C to talk about the future of President Biden's policies under President-elect Trump. He and another very important person who actually headed up an office in the White House is going to join us as well. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. We'll be right back. Back now on The Pulse, diving into all things people, power, and politics. And joining us now to talk about the future of the policies that we're going to be seeing with this new president, State Senator Jim Runestad in Studio C. And live via Skype, we're talking to Roderica Applewhite. And we thank you for joining us, Roderica. She's the former White House Director of Black Media. It's good to see both of you here on The Pulse. What a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so Senator, we'll begin with you in studio. We're hearing a lot from Pete Hegseth today. He's a man who wants to be the next Secretary of Defense. You think he's a qualified man for this job?
Well, he certainly seems to be. There's some issues I'm sure the senators are going to be delving into, as they always do, and these things can be very contentious, especially with such a big transition from Biden over to Trump. You can hardly ask for a bigger transition than those two.
When you look at some of the people who have had that job before, Lloyd Austin was a general, a lieutenant colonel was Mark Esper, a four-star general James Mattis, and then you have someone who has military experience, and by the way, we do not diminish that, has served this country, and so we thank him for his service, but certainly not at the level that the last three people who've been in that spot have had, being a lieutenant colonel, being a general, being a four-star general. Do you think that that's a problem?
Well, you look at the great success of the Biden administration in Afghanistan, where he pulls the military out first and creates a disaster. The fact that Donald Trump has done things differently than has been done in the past is not a bad thing. Very often things are done just because it's always been done a certain way. I think he has a different vision. He's got a lot of things he wants to do completely different than the Biden administration. Militarily, he wants to get out of Ukraine. He wants to be able to negotiate a good deal with that. So Biden said as long as it takes. He's endless war, endless money. He doesn't care. Trump has a completely different vision, and so I think that we're going to go in a different direction, and there may be some real positive surprises.
Roderica, let's bring you into the fold here from Washington. You worked for President Biden. You understand how that administration worked. What are your thoughts on Pete Hegseth being nominated for this big position?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, coming from a military family myself, doing things differently does not mean needing to abandon the concept of military preparedness and readiness. And part of that comes from making sure that you have qualified people at the top dictating what we should be doing with the Department of Defense. And frankly, if you have a nominee that is up who his own mother wrote him an email telling him to be nicer and respect women, when he has gone on record to say that he will stop drinking once he gets the job, which is not how that works for military preparedness. Look, President-elect Trump does not have a shortage of qualified people with military background who could serve in this role. And the fact that he has chosen somebody, which has made most of his career being someone on Fox News, versus someone who's actually had an extensive career in military service dictates to me that Trump is trying to build a cabinet that is looking more like a blank check than really surrounding himself with advisors who are going to give him good, objective advice on how to best run his administration.
Senator Runestad, when you hear someone who worked at that White House say, look, and comes from a military family, this person isn't necessarily qualified to lead with all the problems that you speak of that need to be battled from Ukraine to the Middle East, is someone of Hegseth's ilk the right person right now? And if this was a Democrat who had the allegations against him with drinking and the issues that he's had elsewhere with this minimal experience, would you feel the same way?
I think the Senate's going to do what it always does. They do, both sides will do a great job of due diligence and ferreting out the questions. The Republicans are going to defend this nominee with vigor, and the Democrats are going to question with vigor, and so we'll see how that comes out at the end. But the idea that General Milley was the top general, that we really need to have somebody like that in such a high position. He was just a DEI general. That's why he was hired. So Biden didn't have the best of the best. He had lots of DEI picks on important positions like national defense.
All right, Roderica, let's bring you into the mix and talk about what we're looking at moving forward in this administration. Executive orders, we're expecting dozens upon dozens just on the first day, and a lot of it has to do with the border and border security. How would you rate the Biden and Kamala Harris response to the border crisis in the 4 years that they were in the years that they were in office?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, when President Biden has actually signed a lot of executive orders to ensure that border crossings have decreased, which has been the case over the past several months. And so he has worked with advising across different agencies within the government to make sure that we are keeping crossings down, but also having a pragmatic approach. And that contrasts with President Trump, who wants to do extensive mass deportations without any actual consideration of what that looks like policy-wise, how that impacts border counties and all of the law enforcement agencies that will be in charge of that process. It feels like a lot more of a talking point rather than something that was thought through of how he's actually going to be able to achieve this in a way that actually...
Roderica, if I may just for a moment, but when you think a little bit about the timing of when Biden finally stepped up some of these border patrol issues and finally put some stringent, stricter policies in place, it was when he was in the heat of the election. Many people are asking the question why that was conveniently done so late in his administration. What do you think the answer is to that?
I think it's very comfortable for folks who are outside of the Oval Office to make judgment calls on what timing looks like. I am proud to work for a president that did not make choices based on the convenience of a matter, but rather after fully thinking through the process and what that looks like.
You don't think it was political for him to come so late with making those more border stringent policies?
I think it's the job of the president to make choices that are pragmatic rather than political. And I think Joe Biden was put on a master class over his 4 years of doing exactly that.
Roderica, let me ask you about the concerns you have about tariffs moving forward. We're here in the Motor City, as you know, and what happens in Washington doesn't stay in Washington. It affects us right here. What are your thoughts on the tariff talk that you're hearing coming from the new administration?
Yeah, I think something that is interesting is that folks across the political spectrum have been very clear about how detrimental this would be to the U.S. economy. Every time Trump himself walks through what this process would look like, there seems to be a real abandonment of understanding of the fact that tariffs mean that those companies abroad would be imposing those prices and making up that increase, putting that on the consumer, which is American families. And so I think once people see what that impact actually is and they feel it when they go to the grocery store or when they just try to buy any of their consumer goods, I think it'll be very clear and stark. Sure. And I hope President-elect Trump takes the opportunity to see how that'll impact consumers.
We have 30 seconds left. I have to ask you, the tariff talk has been really disturbing to a lot of people. Do you think that's going to cost the American consumer too much, or are you concerned about that, Senator Runestad?
There's so many moving parts to that. You couldn't possibly address that. I do want to address the immigration. It's a complete lie that it was 10 million. I was down to the border 3 different times. No media down there. It was 30 million. We had local, federal, police, state police, law enforcement all said it was 30 million pouring across the border, completely open border. He's going to start a deportation that absolutely has to happen. And it was what the American people care about, and he's going to do it.
Senator Runestad, I want to thank you for your time. Roderica, thank you for your time, joining us from Washington with your perspective as well. We appreciate both of you. We're getting you up to speed with some stories you might have missed during the massive football weekend, including what some of the Supreme Court justices said about the efforts to ban TikTok. The Pulse is back in just 3 minutes. It is people, power, and politics. Welcome back to The Pulse, everybody, here on Fox 2. You know, there's a lot that's gone on over the last few days, politically speaking, but a lot of good football on TV as well with the NFL playoffs, or maybe you just took a break from the news or politics. We get it. And that's why we're here to get you up to speed with some stories you might have missed during the NFL's wild card round. So in case you missed it, it's truly TikTok for TikTok. We've been talking about it for a while, but the clock is really ticking now. The app's Chinese-owned parent company, ByteDance, went before the Supreme Court trying to block a forced sale or ban of the app in the U.S. We've told you before, national security experts are worried your data could end up in the hands of the Chinese government. But ByteDance says the law violates free speech protections. President Donald Trump, the president-elect, wants the justices to pause the ban so he can try to find a political solution. But most of the justices appear to take those national security risks pretty seriously.
Congress doesn't care about what's on TikTok. They don't care about the expression. That's shown by the remedy. They're saying the Chinese have to stop controlling TikTok.
But just on the data collection, that seems like a huge concern for the future of the country.
ByteDance has until January 19th, a day before the inauguration, this Sunday, to sell the app or face a ban in our country. The justices could rule within the next few days. Well, it'll be a busy week for the Chief Justice because he's getting ready to do something he only does every 4 years, swear in a president right there. You know what? We're less than a week now from the inauguration, and we took you inside preparations for the big event from a security standpoint. Tonight, we're getting a closer look at who will and won't be going. Former First Lady Michelle Obama will not be attending the ceremony, despite her husband, former President Barack Obama, going. A spokesperson for the family didn't say why she wouldn't be there, but it's worth pointing out she also did not attend the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. In addition to former President Obama, current President Biden, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, along with Vice President Harris, will all be right there. We also know former President George W. Bush and First Lady Laura Bush, as well as former President Bill Clinton and First Lady Hillary Clinton, will all be at the big event. This next attendee is more of a what than a who. The garbage truck. You might remember from President-elect Trump's campaign, it'll be part of the parade. You'll remember Trump got into this thing in the final days of the campaign. Just 39 entries made the cut, by the way. The garbage truck was a response to President Biden saying President-elect Trump supporters are garbage after a comedian made a joke about Puerto Rico during the campaign. Biden tried to walk it back, saying what he meant to say was the comedian's rhetoric was garbage. Now, you know who else will be in Washington, D.C.? The Pulse. Photojournalist Howard Mitchell and myself taking the show all about people, power, and politics on the road to cover what will likely be the biggest story in the world. Of course, you'll hear from lawmakers about the big event, but we'll also get your thoughts as well. Many people from Michigan are heading there in the National Mall. I'll be there with Howard. We hope you'll join us for our live inauguration coverage all day Monday and, of course, on the Pulse Monday night and then again Tuesday morning. And with that, that is the Pulse for this Tuesday night. Remember to get in touch with me about the show, whether it's a burning political question or a fact check you want to see. Maybe you want to see something special when I go to Washington. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you want to see. My email is at the bottom of your screen, or you can scan that QR code as well. I'm Roop Raj. Have a good night, everybody.